Much for waiting. We've had a very exciting morning this morning, Grainne. It's been brilliant to have such great speakers on with us, chatting with the students, and thank you for hanging on. We're a little bit late coming to you, but just for a quick introduction to the students, I'm sure you're all aware of Annaveigh Nursery. So Grainne Murphy is a co-owner of the nursery. It's just outside Cashel. I'd say you have 100+ acres, so it's quite a substantial site. They produce top quality trees and shrubs for the domestic and the international market, so the import and export market. And I would say you're an award-winning nursery of the highest standards. Your plants are of the highest standard. You've appeared on television, a few different programs over the years. And look, I'll leave you have a little chat about your career and any advice for the students. And thank you so much.
Hi, and thanks very much for inviting me to join your meeting today. So I suppose it's interesting that I'm talking and Dermot Gavin and Paul Nolan, because the angle I'll come from will be totally different than them. Because while I am a nursery person, I studied in UCD. I did commercial horticulture, so not landscape design. I would not consider myself a plants person. I would consider myself a commercial horticultural person. So I think what I'm going to say will be perhaps quite different from the others, far less idealistic and far more practical in terms of the business itself. So while Dermot is artistic, he obviously has a business side to his head as well, or he has someone helping him with that. So if you do decide to become a landscaper or a garden designer who supplies and plants or commissions landscapers to plant on your behalf in gardens, the commercial side is also really important. So how I got into horticulture is, I suppose this was a little bit of an accident in a way. I grew up at home on a farm. My father had a very successful business, many businesses actually. He was a self-made man, started with nothing. And I have 5 brothers and myself. He had developed a business for each of us that he felt would suit us. So that's 6 different businesses that he had developed very successfully. However, when I was 16, he made one bad decision, and the farm was going to be mine, by the way. And he made one bad decision in his life, and the banks called in the loans. In those times, there was no mercy from the banks. It's not like now where there's NAM and they can all sneak in and sneak back out. In those days, bust was bust. The farmers, he had a grain business, and the farmers owed him at the time £250,000 Irish pounds, which was his downfall. He was too nice to them. He let them have too much credit, and none of them were there when he fell. Even though he was the man who, if you went to dinner with him, nobody would be allowed to pay except him, but you find out who your friends are when you fall. So as a result of that, there was 20 acres left at home, and I was still very interested in the land and all that. So I got advice from the local Teagasc advisor. It wasn't Teagasc then, and he suggested horticulture, and thus I ended up doing horticulture. I applied and got into Kildalton before I did my leaving cert. So I didn't try as hard maybe as I could at my leaving, because I knew I was already had a place in college. At that time, you didn't need your leaving to get into Kildalton. And I ended up with quite a good leaving cert, perhaps because I was under no pressure. So the information probably flowed onto the page because I wasn't worried about whether I was going to get the points or not. And I got into UCD. And after a lot of mulling and decision making, I went to UCD. We did a degree. I'm saying we because my husband is involved in the business here as well, and we met in UCD. So we did the degree in horticulture. At that time, it was about 50-50 commercial and landscape architecture. So that's how it used to divide. Subsequently, it became very small numbers in commercial and large numbers on the landscape and design side. And when we left, there was no jobs at all. Nothing. The only jobs available was to go and work in the UK as an ADAS advisor, which at that time they were going to start to charge for their services. So they were recruiting new personnel because the old advisors couldn't paid the same as an unlearned worker over there, even though we had a degree in horticulture. But we didn't know anything. Let's be truthful about it. We knew nothing about the commercial realities of the world. But through our time there, we managed to wrangle our way to the grafting table. We learned how to graft. We learned how to bud. We went up the rankings. Because of our education, we were able to create opportunities within the business to prove ourselves that perhaps people that hadn't had the education that we'd had. One thing I found education taught me, it wasn't the answers to all the questions, but it was where to find the answers to the questions. And I think that's very important for you to realize. If you sit in an interview and someone says to you, well, what chemical would you spray on that? Well, to me, that's a ridiculous question, because if you want to know that, you go and you find out that. If you're in a position that you need to know, you go and you find out, or what plant would suit there. You can go and find that out. If you're inspired by a yellow plant for that position, then you can look at the research, the plant palette that would be available to you. And especially nowadays with the internet, there's so many opportunities. But education gives you the ability to find out information. And that's probably the primary thing that you guys will be leaving college with, is you'll know where to go for information, both to people and in terms of where to search for it, either in libraries as it was in my day or on the internet. But anyhow, getting back to Germany, while we were in Germany, then we spent every weekend and every time we were free visiting other nurseries. We went visiting botanic gardens. We traveled every weekend, wherever it took, so we could see and learn all the new things and all the types of products that were available, so that we weren't just honed down to little shrubs in little liner pots. And we learned an awful lot about what was available in Germany, because at that time it was considered that Germany was 5 to 7 years ahead of Ireland in terms of plant production, innovation, ideas, technique, in terms of machinery and everything. So we came back to Ireland. Of course, there was still no jobs. We applied for a job in one very reputable nursery, the biggest nursery in the country at the time, and we were offered minimum wage, even though we were one of the rare people to come back with 2 years experience abroad, which was highly sought after, supposedly. And we didn't take that job. But then Paddy Gleeson, I don't know if you know who he is, but he's the former Teagasc advisor, a very famous commercial horticultural figure, recommended us to a man called Chris Byrne in Quillogue Nurseries. And Chris was young and he was innovative. He wanted to create a nursery whereby he would be growing trees by grafting them, callousing on a pot pipe, but it was very specific temperatures and stuff, and then potting them and growing them in tunnels and selling on young trees. And this really appealed to us, and we took that job. We learned a lot there. We brought the techniques and the practical knowledge. And by working there, because there was only John and myself on the higher level in the company, we learned so much about sales, because we had to do all the sales. So we learned an awful lot about the commercial aspect of the business. In addition to that, then Quillogue had a landscape arm, which was their main business, to be honest. Kilmeague Landscapes, you may have heard of it, I'm not sure. It's less active in the business now. And they were one of the biggest at the time, and they won every job. So we learned by listening to them talking quite a lot about how landscape jobs are tendered. How did he manage to win every job and still make money? So he's a clever guy. And yeah, we learned an awful lot there, because we paid a lot of attention to what was going on. He knew a lot more than us. And but he didn't know anything about growing. That's why he hired us. So we created a very successful business in Quillogue. And after about 9 years, we were approached as a team now, approached by SAP down here in Tipperary. And after a lot of persuading, we moved to SAP. John was to run the sales and I was to run the production outside. So basically we did that, and we did that for 12 years and then set up on our own here in Annaveigh. Would it have been possible to set up in Annaveigh without all that experience? No. Did we have to work for very little money at various times to gain that experience? Yes. It's essential that you take whatever job comes along that will give you the experience that you need while you're young and you can afford to live on a smaller salary. The business as it is, it wouldn't pay very well overall. It's not the best business to be in if you want to earn a lot of money. But there are huge opportunities that you can create to earn money. But you need to educate yourselves much further than you're educated already. if you think you can go out and walk into a 50 or 60 grand job now, you'll be very lucky if you find something like that. But those opportunities are there going forward. And if you look at Dermot there, he started out in Mackey's. I'm sure he wasn't paid a lot of money working in Mackey's, but I'm sure he's got plenty of opportunities for money now because he's a well-known and very desired landscape designer. So you have to create the opportunities through the jobs that you go through in your life. No job that you work in will be a mistake. You learn something from everything that you do. And you'll only maybe realize that later on. And you go, oh, yeah, gee. Or even, you know, you could be in a job where you hate it because the person in charge is nasty or not nice. But even that's an education, because then you learn the feeling of not being nice, and you learn yourself how to manage people. And I hate to use this word, but manipulate them into the way that you want them, or what you want them to do as a manager. I often think that being a manager is a bit of a game, because how you handle each person is different. And the game, if you like, is working out what buttons to press for John and another button to press for Jane. And you know, each person has a huge amount to offer, but you have to press the right button to get it back and to motivate them to be productive. And that's something that perhaps some of you already have learned because you've worked in other jobs. But it's a huge asset if you can learn to read people. And I would have found over the years, you know, people say, oh, I don't like that person and I hate that person and all that. I'll never talk to them again, or I'll never deal with them again. That's not an attitude that I have. I'd always talk to people, but I'll know what that person is like. And I would never let them hurt me again if they hurt me or whatever, because I'll work them. I'll work them to suit me. And that's, I know it sounds quite manipulative, but if you think about your lives, you probably do it with your friends as well. You know, so it's something that you really need to work on, is dealing with people, because it's also dealing with the customers. So you guys, if you're into the landscape design, you go into a garden, you look at it, and the husband, the wife is there. And you have to work out who's running this, who's paying for it, and who's deciding what actually goes in. So you know who to appeal to if you have an idea that you need to get over the line. And that's something you have to work out quickly. Often you find the man is disinterested, but he may be traditionally, you know, unfortunately, it's still quite a lot still like this in our business. He might be paying, especially with the people who have a lot of money. The richer people, the wives tend to spend the money. And this isn't being a mean thing. I'm a woman. I feel, you know, this is and from talking to our landscape designers and stuff, the wife might make the decisions, but the man would stop it maybe because he doesn't want to spend the money. One lady who is an excellent designer buys a lot of plants from us, and she said she was working with a husband and wife team, and the husband was a very wealthy man, but didn't like to spend it. So that's probably why he was wealthy. But everything she wanted in the garden, she got, because she told the designer, who was able to get around him, that she had to have it. So if she rang up the designer and said, I'd really like this, she would say, no, you have to get this over the line, because he would say no to the wife, but the designer got it over the line every time. So the designer learned how to, in that relationship, how to satisfy everybody and get the man to spend the money to keep the wife happy. You know, so from your perspective, they're huge, huge things. And they're as important as learning about plants and learning about wild and wonderful varieties and stuff like that. You'll be more successful if you can talk to people and learn how to get around them, than if you bury yourself in a whole load of rare and exotic plants. That's if you're motivated to be successful and perhaps to be a high earner. From Annaveigh's point of view, just to give you an idea, I just did a quick few pictures just to show you a little bit of how the place looks. And just to give, in case any of you is interested in the commercial side and the growing side of trees, how the process, it's very short. It's just a few processes so you can have a flavor if you're interested in the commercial. So I'm just going to share my screen here and bring this up. So what I did was I just did a quick 20 pictures to show you the start to finish of the growing the trees. So here we have the start, which is the planting. So we plant with a tractor and the machine behind. still involves a lot of manual labor. No matter what you do, our business involves a lot of manual labor. There's no way around it. So they're planting the trees there. So in the next slide is a close-up of them going into the ground. Oh, sorry. Going into the ground there. Now they're planted, and we till the middle of the rows, and the man is coming down the middle of the row there. You can see him up in the distance. Here he is again, and he's sowing grass. So environmentally, we sow grass down the middle of the rows, and that remains there till the trees are harvested, and it serves a number of purposes. It rests the ground in between to allow us to replant the field a second time in the middle of the rows. So the soil remains very friable and everything in the middle of the rows. We cut the grass during the summer, so we're returning, if you like, the nutrients back into the soil because we leave the clippings on it. And we try to, where possible, blow the clippings up on the rows of trees to reduce the usage of pesticides to control the weeds. So we get a little bit of mulch. It does help. And the grass offers stability for the machines when they are working in the field. This is the grass just coming up. These trees now are 1 year after they were planted. So if I planted these now, this would be not this summer, next summer, just to show you the type of performance that you get. Every tree gets a bamboo cane and is tied, all manual. The machine drives the cane, but 2 men have to be there to do the driving of the cane. This is the caning machine here. So if the tree is pushed out of the way, it drills a hole, and then a man comes and pushes the cane into the ground. Then the trees have to be tied. So this is the guy tying. There's men in every picture. This is the pruning platform, which elevates up and down to allow them to prune and tie the trees to all the heights required. It has a cover on it to protect against wind and sun. So it's actually quite a nice environment to work in for the lads. This is just a picture of a guy pruning. He's clipping the Quercus fastigiata. So you know, he's looking back now to see where he's going to clip next to try and maximize the quality of the tree. This is a picture up on the platform. So when trees go above the height of the cane, they get an extension cane, which is what you see in the platform. And that gets put into the top of the other cane. So therefore, we're trying to keep the trees straight for as long as possible. This is just to show you the trees the summer before they're harvested. You can see the progression in terms of growth and the bushiness and fullness of the heads. Again, another picture, they're Acer campestre red shines. Lime trees, actually they're a year younger now than the previous slide. I should have had that one before. This is just a shot of autumn color to cheer you up. So now these guys are measuring the trees. So the trees are measured in the end of September, and they're sold by the circumference of the tree at a meter, which I'm sure you all know. So each tree that's for sale has to be manually measured like this, and it gets a color tape around it to indicate the size. And then we have a stock take, and we know what we have for sale that year, because even if we plant all the trees, we'll say at 6 to 8 centimeters, each tree will perform differently in the row. So you could get some trees that will go to 16, 18, and some of them that only go to 8, 10. So every tree has to be measured to check. This is the root balling machine. This was done as a demonstration in the summer, so that's why there's leaves on the trees, but just so you can see it's like an ice cream scoop for all the world. And then this is the machine actually in action, and on the right side there you can see the hessian, and the basket is under the hessian. So the lads pull up the basket and make the root ball that you see. So these are the root balls after he's finished. And this is the type of a bare root tree that we would like to grow, and we are striving to grow all the time. Most of our roots are very good like that. And this is, if you can get roots like this, root balling isn't really needed, only maybe from 1820 upwards, but it's hard to get roots like that all the time. That would be a 4 times transplanted tree. There's better opportunities at the moment to sell them like this, because trees are extremely scarce. In fact, all horticultural produce is very scarce, and prices have gone through the roof, which you might say is a good thing. It's a good thing in one way for us and a bad thing in another way, which I can explain in a minute. Then when a field is finished, we rest it for a year to two. And this is a marigold crop, which is a green manure crop with the dog jumping in it. And that gets sown in May and would be cut in October. And the tops go back into the soil. Like, we don't take them off the soil or anything. It's just chopped up. That's Phacelia, another green manure crop we use. So they get cut again and reincorporated into the soil. This is them cutting the marigolds. So they're cut and incorporated. Now, marigolds, the reason we use marigolds sometimes is that they're very good soil sterilant, natural sterilant. So if you have rosaceae species, you have a replant disease, where if you plant apples after apples, you get a replant disease, roses after roses, and so on. So we do have quite a range of rosaceae in our plant palette. So we do have to try and minimize the risk of the replant disease occurring. So 2 crops of marigold is very beneficial in reducing the flora and fauna, the palette of bacteria that cause the disease. I just put these in to show you a little bit about the technology that's available in other countries. So these are laurels, but if you look at how uniform they are, tops and sides, these are clipped, planted by GPS, clipped by a machine controlled by GPS, harvested by GPS. So the machine that does all the work after the planting is run by one man. The computer, it's computerized and it runs 24 hours a day. And one man runs it. So one man goes along and he clips all them with the machine. And the machine is doing it himself. He just has to make sure it doesn't break down. So it's technology. Like, look at how uniform the plants are. See how wide? They're all the same width. Again, a bigger one, all done. This is in Holland, all done by machine. If anyone's interested in the technical side, look at the Bux's balls, all cut by machine. So I thought I'd just include that for the technical buffs there. And when the trees are all ready, Trevor there sells them. So that's the end of my slides. Okay. Yeah, so that's just to give you a flavor of what we do. So I just have a few more things to say to you. Things have changed a lot. COVID-19 has brought a lot of negatives, but it's brought a lot of positives for our industry. People want to be outside to get away from COVID. They want to be outside because they're bored out of their minds being at home. People working from home are, dare I say, maybe fed up a little bit of it, in a sense that they don't get connection with people. But having their gardens and having the outdoor spaces to walk in, parks, greenways, and etc., and they're exercising more than they were. How much longer that'll continue, I don't know. I suspect if people work from home, there'll be a far greater need for outdoor space. That's good for us. That's good for all of us in the industry, both designers and growers and everything. So I think we're at a very exciting juncture in terms of horticulture. I think there's an awareness developing. Do I think it'll stay at the momentum at the moment? No, of course not, because when people can go on holidays again, they're not going to spend it on their garden. However, they will, perhaps we'll have more people who'll be interested. It won't be everyone, but hopefully there'll be an increase in the number of people interested in their garden than there was before this happened. It's bound to happen. Then there's huge opportunity in horticulture to be growers. Usually in colleges, no one's interested in being a grower. The nurseries are not being replaced when they close down because there's hardly any young people. We're lucky that my son, who's 23, is actually interested, but he wants to work outside, but he's very interested in the trees and all that. Not trained in horticulture. He did a business degree in England, but he was always interested in nature and the trees. But he will be one of the few young people that's getting involved at the commercial and growing end of the business. So, you know, if you have an opportunity and it's an area that interests you, there are huge opportunities at all levels on the commercial growing side. They cannot get staff anywhere in Europe to do the work. Tree nurseries in Holland, they could sell 3 times more trees, but none of them are increasing their acreage because they can't get anyone to do it. So that'll tell you, you know, we can't increase our acreage because, well, we can't get land, but also we can't get any more staff. I've spent the last 3 months looking for some general operatives that we could train up or even train people I haven't found one person. And if you do find them, then you can't find accommodation in the area. So there's huge opportunities there, huge. And I suppose, if you're interested in the growing side, there is big opportunities. You don't have to grow rare and rare species or very fancy species that aren't normally grown in Ireland. You don't have to stick to the normally grown species either. However, I sometimes feel that using the rare species and bringing them in, we're creating problems for our own natural habitat, and that maybe we should be sticking a little bit more with what's been grown in Ireland over a longer period and trying to incorporate them in maybe cleverer ways, or be a little bit different in how they're used. If I was asked to give you all advice, my advice would be learn plants, learn what you're specifying, learn how to specify them. This is if you're into the landscaping or garden design. It's so important. Most people leaving college haven't a clue. I'm not throwing any aspirations on yourselves, but if you saw some of the specifications that come in here, they would shock you, that people could be so uneducated after coming out of college. You need to know simple things. What is a 2-litre pot? How big is a 2-litre pot? What is a 10-litre pot? What is a P9? Because the landscapers who are in the business will fool you if you don't know. They'll catch you. Know your plants, at least know your basic palette of plants. If it's trees, know what a lime looks like, know what a beech. You don't need to know necessarily the variety specifically, but know that if you walk into a garden, you go, that's a beech tree. You wouldn't believe how many people walk in here and go, oh, that's a beech tree and it's a lime tree, and you're going, oh my God. Or they go, that curses, and you're going, hey, are you in horticulture? It's really important that you come across that you know what you're talking about. And so put time into it, put time into learning the basic plant palette, and then you can add on the rarer plants afterwards. If you're like me, who's got this logical commercial brain and wouldn't be arty at all. I wouldn't even do a design if my friend asked me, So learn the basic plant palette so that you know what you're using, and make sure you know what's actually available. The biggest thing that we see is plants get specified and you're going, Eucryphia 1820. I've never seen one in my life. The biggest one I've ever seen is 60 centimeters. It comes from Chile. So if you want a Eucryphia, it has to come from Chile. How many air miles is that, if you can even get it? There used to be one nursery in Waterford that grew a few, but that's also important to try and specify what's available, and then be flexible. If something is not available, do your relevant research, make sure that the person isn't telling you a lie if it's someone you haven't a rapport with, but be flexible in your choice. Just because you want a Rudbeckia, Bob's your uncle there. Well, if Rudbeckia Goldstream looks almost the same and the only difference is there's one extra petal on it, will your customer know? Absolutely not. We had a thing a few years ago that the landscape designer wanted a white camellia, a very specific variety. I can't even remember the name of it. And he wanted it because the flowers fell off of it rather than staying on it after the flowers finished. The plant was only available in England in a P9 pot, and it cost €45. His client didn't have a clue whether the flower fell off the camellia or not. They were only so ordinary people. They didn't care. This was them satisfying their own whatever that inner desire that they wanted them. The client didn't. But so think about the clients. Most of us are simple people. We don't need a camellia that the flower falls off when it dies. It's going to fall off anyway. So just be a little bit clever and a little bit careful. Unless you become Diarmaid Gavin, you're going to make more money by being simple with your plant palette. And of course, it's nice to do a really sexy design, but probably to make a name for yourself, you probably need to do what Diarmaid Gavin did, which is to go and do your shows and get your gold medals. And that's a big help to becoming a top designer. So while the shows are a bit of a farce, and what you do, it's a completely different, you nearly need to be a professional showgoer to understand how these designs evolve. But yeah, just that's my advice. Just be flexible, be clever, and keep it simple until you establish yourself and you get to know the boundaries of what you and your clients want. And if anyone is interested in commercial, I would actively encourage you to get involved in the commercial side. It's very interesting. Do loads of traveling, visit loads of nurseries, loads of botanic gardens, loads of all those things, and learn as much as you can while you can afford to, because once you settle down, it becomes very difficult to afford to do the more exciting things like traveling and visiting nurseries and stuff. So I don't have anything else to say, really. I probably went on for ages as well, but anyway.
So thanks so much. It's been really valuable to hear from you today, Grainne. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.